I'm Will Hardy, husband, father, entrepreneur, hotelier, and filmmaker, and a man in the middle of his story. I've had wins, I've had breakdowns, I've had moments where I felt unstoppable, and moments where I didn't know if I could take one more step. And I know I'm not the only one. This podcast is a place where we tell the truth, where leaders, dreamers, husbands, wives, entrepreneurs can come clean about the real journey. Because together, we heal faster. Together, we get clearer. Together, we rise. This is an invitation to walk with me, not after it's perfect, but while it's still being written. Welcome to Interrupt. Well, good morning. Welcome to the Interrupt podcast, where life's interruptions can and will become divine invitations. Man, I could barely sleep last night. I was so excited about this opportunity to talk to today's guest. This is a man that really needs no introduction. What an impressive resume. Scott is a 42-year-old veteran of the healthcare industry, leading multi-billion-dollar organizations as a CEO for the last 25 years. He's been featured as one of the best places to work in the healthcare space multiple times. Founder of a $33 billion healthcare organization, as well as an additional $1 billion healthcare organization that was featured on Harvard Business School as in one of their most recent case studies. Scott is a man of many, many talents. He is also a best-selling author of 7 books, 2 that are the most recent, The Ancient Ladder and Acre of Fools, that I'm super pumped to talk about a little bit later. He's worked on many boards, profit, nonprofit boards, and he's currently the executive producer of an upcoming miniseries based on his novel Acre of Fools. And last but not least, Scott is the faithful husband of one woman, Deborah, for 40 years. Wow. And has 2 beautiful daughters and 3 incredible grandsons. Scott MacLellan, so what an honor to have you, man. Thank you for taking the morning to be with us here on the Interrupt podcast. How in the world are you doing, man?
Oh, I'm doing great this morning and so excited to be here. I'm really excited about what you're going to be doing with this podcast and to be one of the first guests. What an honor. So thanks for having me.
Well, absolutely, man. I wanted to start off with a bang, and I couldn't think of a better person. Scott,
Well,
just to
thank
give you
you.
a little background of the idea behind this is, I'm interviewing a lot of high-end entrepreneurs, men and women that have accomplished really, really great things in life. Me as an entrepreneur as well for 25 years, started companies, sold companies. So I've got a little bit of that, not quite to that billionaire status that you've accomplished, which is unbelievable. But, really, I wanted to build this, Scott, to talk about the messy middle, right? Sometimes it looks really clean on paper, but it's not quite as clean behind the scenes. And so this podcast, Interrupt, is really about those divine interruptions, right? The things that have happened in our life that really draw something out of us to a higher caliber, sometimes through surrender, sometimes through awakening. And so I just got to ask you, man, diving right into the messy, has it always looked this clean? Tell me a little bit about the healthcare industry, why you got in that, and then I want to talk about maybe some of the messy moments of life that really throw us curves that you had to just go to the next level with.
Yeah, I feel like I've lived most of my life in that messy middle. So no, it hasn't always looked this clean. Was really fortunate to join a healthcare company right out of college. With just some incredible bosses and mentors and people who just brought me up in the right way to lead and the right way to execute. And so I was very, very fortunate to get some of that training early on. Started right out in healthcare and really never completely left the industry. I had some detours where I ended up doing some things that ended up back in the healthcare space, but I spent probably 40 of the 42 years directly within healthcare, which has been a dynamic market to be part of. Just as I was coming in, it was the Wild West. There was no regulation, nothing. Bill Clinton started to introduce managed care, which is a name some people would remember. And from there, it's just evolved constantly during those 40 plus years. So I've just been trying to keep up, grab the tiger by the tail and just try to hang on.
Incredible. Scott, if you don't mind me
Yeah,
asking, how old are you?
I'm 64.
Wow. If we could all be as lucky as you to look that good at 64, that's incredible. Well, you've
Falling apart on the inside, but that's okay.
well, I get that, man. Yeah. So man, you were really a pioneer for this space in the industry. Incredible. So let me ask you this. So you've got one wife, Deborah. You've got two beautiful daughters, but obviously I know your story because we've had a lot of conversations about this, and we've become fast friends over the last year with the project Acre of Fools. But you've ran billion-dollar businesses, right, for decades. But behind the titles, behind the accolades, if we can open up the curtain a little bit and talk about maybe some of the darker moments of what you've experienced, specifically with your daughter, I'd love to get in that with you.
Yeah, happy to jump in. So, as you mentioned, married to a wonderful wife for 40 years. Our two girls are in their late 30s. They have three boys between them. We're lucky enough to be raising one of those, and the other two live 5 minutes away. So, all that sounds very normal and wonderful. But we had our share of the messy. My youngest daughter was born with a very rare form of cancer.
Mm,
And it was so rare that it did get diagnosed for 2 years. And it was only when a job move took me to Chicago. There are two hospitals in the world that studied this disease. And this is obviously a God orchestrated moment. That one hospital in the United States happened to be in Chicago. And an intern that had done a residency through that ended up as her pediatrician, which again, God orchestrated.
mm.
She recognized the disease, brought us downtown Chicago, and she went on to survive that and also survive cancer three times by the age of 7.
Wow.
She's had two liver transplants and more than 150 surgeries in her lifetime. And if all that wasn't enough, she became addicted during her second liver transplant, way before there was an opioid crisis. People just didn't understand what the opioids were doing. And she spent the next 13 years as an addict. So while all this was going on the business side, my wife and I, and my oldest daughter had 3 decades of lots of challenges in the health space and in the mental health space.
Scott, were you all traveling? I can't imagine. I just cannot imagine that as a father. What that experience must have been like, what it felt like. I'm sure you talk about a dark night of the soul, right? Moments where
Yeah.
sleepless nights. I'm assuming you all were traveling all over the world, the country, basically, trying to find proper treatment and new revelations about, what she was dealing with, right?
Yeah, and again, all of this was miraculous. Again, one out of two hospitals in the world was in Chicago, and the one pediatrician who'd just gone through a residency on that disease happened to be her pediatrician when we first got there. Um, Her first liver transplant was also experimental. She and I were the 50th pair to experiment with living related liver donation.
Mm,
And that was only happening at about five places in the world. And one of them happened to be at a different hospital in Chicago. We were just blessed enough to be able to find all these things right where we were. Neither my wife nor I wanted to move to Chicago, but God had other things in mind, and we ended up with some of the best healthcare in the world right where we needed it to be. So
incredible.
we were
So
very blessed. Yeah.
this it's unreal, man. What a divine connection, right? The
Yes.
addiction space, man. Such a tough topic. So many people are battling this across our nation. As men in general, we have our own kind of toxic habits, right? Things that kind of draw
Yeah.
us out of becoming self-sabotaging, becoming kind of the highest versions of ourselves. But it's one thing when you deal with that, personally as a man, but to have your little daughter experience this, I'm sure that's a extremely helpless feeling. Um, most people can't imagine, running multi-billion dollar companies, right? And the stress load that already carries, right? The innovation, the creativity, the advancement, but I just get this image as a father and again, carrying some of my own weight and stress as an entrepreneur. I get this picture of like, you spending hour after hour in the weekends in the hospital, in the emergency room, and, staying up countless hours with your daughter, probably sleeping very little, probably spending more time on your knees than anything else, right? And then in the moment of that, like knowing Monday morning, you've got to, get in the shower, you got to put that suit and tie on, you've got to put that face on, and you got to become CEO, right? You got to go back into
Yes.
this organization, this a whole other world. Um, Yeah, man, I've been in seasons of my life where it's like, if my wife and I are even in like what I would consider an argument, it's hard for me to go to work. It's hard for me to transition my mind to go, man, I've got to, man up and get out there. So I'm just curious, man, in doing that, the vulnerability, how did you first off not fall into complete self-preservation for this, but how did you find the balance, Scott?
Yeah, so I would say the whole work-life balance piece is a myth,
Mm.
especially if you're starting companies, which being an entrepreneur,
It's not for the faint of
my
heart.
av not for the faint of heart. My average work week was 60 to 80 hours. I mean, and a good week was 60 hours,
Yeah.
and 100 hours were. It's not unusual to actually have to do that, but what you have to do ultimately is prioritize and kind of come back in when the situations demand it. And my wonderful wife just handled most of the appointments, but when she was in the hospital, my youngest, we would have to divide and conquer with my other daughter.
Mm.
So we were constantly, one of us was in the hospital, one of us was taking care of the other daughter. And I mean, this went on for decades. And so it was just a real team effort, if you will, to keep it going. But to get that game face on, going back to work, that was, to your point, a very difficult thing to do.
Mm.
And the feedback I got was that I didn't share enough about what was going on at
Mm.
home. The feedback was that, gee, you're very distant. We don't know what's going on with you. We know something's happening because you're in the hospital all the time, but you don't share it. And I just felt like it wasn't their responsibility to live what we were going through.
Mm.
But I had a wonderful team, really loving, compassionate people who wanted to help, wanted to come in. And I wish I'd taken advantage of that more over the years.
Yeah. Scott, why
Yeah,
do I can so relate to that. And I think so many listeners that are going to be listening to this can relate to that very thing. That vulnerability piece, right? That place to where, you can push self-preservation aside and you can really, kind of expose that, you're not the Superman that everybody thinks you are, right? That's
right.
such a
That's right.
difficult thing to do in the working place and in the world. Why do you think that, why is that one of our greatest struggles, as men? Is it just this idea that we have to carry more than what we're really capable of carrying, or what is that?
Yeah, I think just our role, if you will, is to lead, and so I think part of leading is not imposing your own issues on other people. So I think we take that on as a result. But I think as people have evolved, and in a very good way, they want to be part of the personal experience as well. They don't just want a business leader; they want a human being.
Hmm.
And so I think maybe the roles are not as defined as we think they are. And I think when you actually start living real life with real people, we have to put that, structured role off to the side and just be willing to jump in with all of us, be fully who we are in the workplace. And for me, that was, the dad of a family going through some stuff. And I think people wanted to hear more about that.
Man, yeah, well, it's I think Brene Brown, she was one of the forefront leaders to really open up the conversation about vulnerability, right?
Right.
Transparency, vulnerability. And again, as a leader, I know that I've had struggles with that, difficulty, really exposing, the kind of the messy and the raw. But that's really what we wanted to create this show for, is to let people know that, as clean as it looks like on paper, sometimes you really don't understand a lot of the times the true struggle, right? That we
That's
go
right.
through as human beings, and the sacrifices that we make. So, through the process of you caring for your daughter, and then I can't imagine the mental battle. I've got 4 children myself, right? And it's like, you try to be fair to all your children. You try to, love them the same way and give them the same gifts and, do the same experiences with them. I can imagine that was also an incredible struggle for you, right? That, you're pouring your entire heart and soul to your one daughter, and probably feeling like you're missing out on a lot of other special moments with your other daughter. Would you have felt that
That's right.
way?
Oh, for sure. And I will tell you that my oldest just was so strong throughout this and would
Mm.
repeatedly say, Dad, I get it. You got to focus there. So
Wow.
she was absolutely amazing. But both my wife and I had to prioritize giving her the most normal childhood she could have.
Hmm.
And so we tried to shield her from a lot of what was really going on and just let her be a kid,
Hmm.
and try to be there as much for her as we were for the youngest. We weren't always able to balance that. But she was probably the strongest of the other three of us as we went through this, because she went on to live a wonderful life and a wonderful woman of God today.
Incredible, incredible. What a true
Yeah,
testament. So
yeah,
let's dive into that addiction piece a little bit. What was the
yeah.
turning point from her receiving health care for her medical condition, becoming addicted to opioids? Obviously, the story goes a lot darker than that, right?
That's right.
What was the transition? About what age and what timeline was this?
So she had her second liver transplant at the age of 17.
Mm,
And leading up to that, her insides were literally rotting.
mm,
That liver, because it was experimental, again, we were only the 50th pair in the world to try this out, failed pretty much immediately. And she had multiple surgeries to try to save it, couldn't be saved, and it was time for another one. And the 2 years leading up, she had tubes sticking out all over her body. She couldn't eat. So she had a feeding tube up her nose. And here she is in high school trying to just be a high school student. And
mm,
she's going through all of this. But she was on heavy opioids the 2 years leading up to the transplant because she was in severe pain. Again, her insides were literally rotting outside of her body.
mm,
And this was before the opioid crisis. And my wife and I began to see a change in behavior, a change in attitude over time. And we kept telling the doctors, I think she's addicted. And they would say, no, you can't get addicted to this stuff. This was in
mm.
the pre-awareness stage of what opioids were all
What
about.
what
And then
what year
they'd say,
what year would this have been, Scott? Approximately?
oh gosh, well, it would have been 20 years ago. So
Okay.
'05, I guess,
Yeah.
somewhere in there. And we kept seeing this. And then when she was in the hospital and was in legitimate pain, I mean, she was just all she was doing was, I need more medicine. I need more medicine. And we would say to the doctors, I think you're just feeding this even more. And they would remind me of what it was like to be a liver donor and the pain
Mm,
I was in. And they
mm.
were right. So I was like, I backed off. And then afterwards,
So,
they
sorry,
started
Scott.
to,
Sorry to interrupt. So you were the donor of the
I
liver?
was, I was the donor. Yeah. Back in
Wow.
'93. Yeah.
Amazing.
It was something. Um,
So
and
you
they
so
were
you just got
they
you
were
just got a small glimpse of the pain that she was really experiencing.
exactly, yeah. So we have the same Mercedes-Benz shaped scar on our stomach that takes
Mm,
up our whole abdomen.
yeah.
But anyway, they reminded me of the pain I was in, so I backed off, and then we kept saying, you've got to start tapering her off of this. But they tapered way too quickly, like 30 days. And she was going insane. I mean, literally violent, throwing things around the house, demanding medicine, going into our cabinets, taking, whatever medicine we were using, even though it had nothing to do with pain.
Mm,
And it got really bad really fast. And then all of a sudden, she stopped complaining. And what we didn't realize is she had connected with friends who were drug users, and that was the beginning of her criminal drug use.
mm,
And then so it started, I would say the next 3 or 4 years were gradual. I mean, but again, you could see that she was off. She was not just a teenager, but kind of even more of an irrational teenager than most. But then the last 8 years or so was just hardcore on the street. So it was this just gradual decline at first, and then kind of went off a cliff, and kind of feeling like at the time there was no turning back. It
yeah.
was a desperate time. Yeah.
Mm, unbelievable. So in that season, you're battling this, CEO of a company, trying to be the father to another child, trying to be a husband, wearing all these hats, showing up, doing the very best you can to keep a smile on your face. Was there a point to where the weight just got so heavy? I want to call it maybe a breaking point, something like that. Was there a breaking point experience for you to where you just kind of came to the end of yourself through this entire process?
Yeah. So you have 100 breaking points along the way. Some of
That's
them
right.
more extreme than the others, but in the real breaking point, that's where I think the greatest lessons in life are found. and the greatest growth, both just as a human being, but also spiritually, happened. And I can think of three stories in particular, and the first two are related to each other. And this goes back to when she was ill. So my daughter was sick enough that she could go from totally fine to literally near death in a matter of about 3 or 4 hours.
Mm.
This one hospital that we were going to was a blessing, but it was 2 hours away. And she would always seem to get sick at night, like around 10 or 11, up through about 1 in the morning. And we were always in this, do we need to take her to the ER or not? Because every time she went, she had to stay in the hospital for the next 2 weeks. But this one night, things were bad and just immediately got her in the car. And part of her condition is she would throw up blood when this happened.
Mm.
And so we would hand our little, 3-year-old child a salad bowl, and she'd be in the back of the car. Now, this is in the middle of the night, so I can't even see her. I would just hear her throwing up blood. And, your daughter's literally dying in the back seat. You're driving 2 hours through downtown Chicago. And I finally get her to the ER. And, this was a particularly bad time, and they see immediately how desperate she is. And they take her in back to the room, and one nurse becomes two, becomes 10, becomes 20. And each time they're like, sir, you need to back away, right? And she's calling for me, but I can't see her because I'm at the door, and you've got 20 adults kind of all around her. And there was something about this time when I just snapped.
Mm.
I'd been through this many times before, but there was something about that night that I snapped. And I found the only other place in the ER that had a door, and it was a bathroom. And I ran into the bathroom, and there was a towel in there, and I grabbed the towel and I just screamed into that towel for like 20 minutes. I mean, guttural from the soul screams to the point where I was exhausted. And I just fell back against the wall, slid down onto the floor, and just looked up at God and said, why won't you let me fix this?
Mm.
But there was my problem. I was trying to fix it. I was trying to be the savior, and I'm not the savior, but I was trying to be. And just kind of the miraculous second part of that story is 2 weeks later, my daughter's still in the hospital, and I'm now home with my older daughter, and I'm shaving in the mirror, and she's sitting on the tub behind me, and I'm talking to her in the mirror. And, I turn around, put shaving cream on her nose, and we're just having this wonderful conversation. Now, she's 4 at this point, and all of a sudden she looks up at me and she says, Daddy, I chose you.
Mm.
And what you need to know is I had read a book in high school, and whether you believe this or not, I had read this book that said children choose their parents. And I had always wondered, given what we were going through, did both of my daughters choose to be in this situation? So when she said, I chose you, man, that got my attention. And I literally, my razor drops into the sink.
Mm.
And I said, what, love? And she goes, Daddy, you were broken, and God sent me to fix you.
Mm.
So this is a 4-year-old saying this.
Out of the mouth of babes, right?
Out of the mouth of babes. And so what I realized in that moment is it wasn't my job to fix the situation. It was God's job to fix the situation. So as broken as I was in that ER, that's when God chose to reveal to me what was really inside of me. And there's an expression, good times conceal what tough times reveal.
Mm-hmm.
And, my heart, my desire to be the savior was revealed at the darkest moments in that part of my life.
Gosh, man.
Yeah. And then
Unbelievable.
the third story, and this was again a very transformative moment. When my daughter was at the worst of her addiction, I grabbed her and brought her out to lunch. I wanted to keep a thread of connection with her, and she just looked horrible. I had bought her a hotel room for the night. I would do that every now and again, just to get her off the street, let her clean up, but she did not clean up, and she came out and she smelled horrible. She was in baggy men's sweatpants and a mixed match sweatshirt, and her hair. And because she had gone bald 3 times, she was always very meticulous about her hair, but it was all messed up.
Mm.
And I take her to lunch, and I am just judging her with every fiber of my being, because she couldn't have been farther away from the daughter that I had envisioned. And I got this, and had to be the Holy Spirit, because I wasn't thinking this, just comes in and says, don't judge her for the next 5 minutes. Just love her.
Wow.
And I obeyed that and kind of fell into that. And it was like the best 5 minutes we'd ever had. I don't think I had listened to her for 8 or more years. And I think for the first time, she felt listened to. And I used that moment to beg her, just please come with me to detox, come with me to rehab. And she wouldn't, and she just kept asking for money. And so I eventually take her back, and as she's walking back into the hotel room that I bought her, she turns around, and usually she's very angry when I don't give her money, but she
Mhm.
just gave me a little wave and a smile, and all I could see was my little girl. But she
Mhm.
turned around and walked right back into the life that was literally killing her. And that's the moment at that time that I lost my faith. I stopped believing that she could get well. I even stopped from that point praying that she would get off of drugs. And the best prayer that I could articulate from that point forward was, God, just get her through another day.
Mhm.
Um, and so I turn around and I'm driving home and I'm thinking about AA, which is basically, the only way to cure addiction is to have a profound spiritual experience. And I kept praying, God, give her that profound spiritual experience. And then I got another one of those lucid thoughts that said, Scott, you need a profound spiritual experience.
Mm.
And so I had to go spend the next 5 years or so just working on myself, getting myself back. So again, at my most broken moments, God just stepped in and healed and taught and guided.
This is so touching, man. I can't imagine, talk about a father's love, right? We're going to be talking to a lot of men and women, right? And as a father of four, I know, the heart behind wanting to protect your children, right? At
Yeah,
all cost. And I'm a true believer that it's never the children's responsibility to come after the parent. It's always the parent's responsibility to chase the child.
right.
But I see that vision and I think, she's walking out of this hotel room. You had just a glimpse of hope, right? There was maybe that one moment where you thought she might be finally hearing me, bringing some level of understanding and clarity, and that maybe she comes back home this time, right? Maybe you get your little girl back, and to see her turn around and leave that room, and the helplessness you must have felt in that moment. But again, I'm still thinking even beyond that, you had to get up the next day and go run this billion-dollar company, right?
That's right.
It's beyond me. I mean, talking about coming to a place of surrender. Um, so I'm curious, right? You've got an angel of a wife, Deborah,
Yeah, that's
and
right.
there's no doubt that thank God you had her, through this process. By the way, to hear your little girl say, "Daddy, I chose you," I got teary eyed. I just like, I mean,
Me too.
what we all would love to hear from our children, right? If we're safe enough with them to say, Dad, I chose you, right? Such an impactful moment. A little bit of a put a little wind in your sails, obviously, in that moment. But you and Deborah married for 40 years. I can't imagine the stress that you're both experiencing through this. I'm just curious, man. I think about my own marriage, and you've heard the analogy, kind of you tend to hurt the people that you're closest to or you love the most.
Yeah,
And a lot of that time it's unconscious, it's unintentional. It's just that when the pressure is so high, right? All the pressure points are there and you just can't give anymore and you can't surrender anymore and you can't love anymore. I'm ashamed to say that even in my own marriage and certain struggles of our life where I'll just kind of snap at my wife. I can't do anymore. I can't be anymore for you or anyone else. And really, that's just, I'm just really mirroring my own insecurities, right? As a man, and my own fears, my own anxiety, my own worries in that moment of just not being able to fix it. We're fixers, right? We want to
yeah.
fix these situations as quickly as possible. Was, if you wouldn't mind, tell me through your daughter's addiction and all that you faced, what were I'm just curious, like, what were the things that were exposed in your marriage for the good and for the bad?
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to ask the question, what was exposed in your marriage? Because again, I think when you go through the fire, things get exposed that wouldn't go if you were just, in really good times.
Yeah.
I would say two things. Number one is that we're a great team.
Mm.
When we get into difficulty, we do what needs to be done. My wife did amazing things, stepped up and did what needed to be done, and I did the same. And then we would come together kind of plan our strategy and then go forward and be a good team. Again, even if we were in separate places, she was here, I was there. We were still doing what needed to be done in the moment.
Mm.
And I think kind of the end of that, after 40 years of going through all that together, we're stronger, more in love, more friends than we were 40 years ago. And I don't know that our marriage would have achieved that had we not gone through all that together.
Mm.
And so I was blessed, hopefully she was blessed to be able to be in tough times with someone you could depend on. And so that was wonderful. I think what also got exposed, at least for me, I'll just speak for myself, was that I wasn't grounded in my faith,
Mm.
and that got exposed because I was very performance based, right? God loved me if things went well, and
Now
things
you're
clearly
speaking
were
my
not going.
language.
Things were clearly not going well, and so it just kind of exposed my faith for what it was, which was surface level, weak. And I think both of us, my wife and I, have grown in our faith together as well throughout all of this. We have the blessing of having walking miracles in our family. My daughter's one, my grandson, who is my daughter's son, he shouldn't have been here. She wasn't supposed to be able to get pregnant. They had
Mm.
told us that it was unlikely that she'd ever get pregnant. And if she did, she wouldn't survive a pregnancy and a delivery. Um, and so the fact that he's here, walking, talking miracles, I get to see the blessings, the miracles of God literally every day.
Mm.
And when you see that, both as an individual and as a couple, it's very faith building, but it just brings you stronger together because you take nothing for granted.
Absolutely. I mean, you guys were in the trenches together, and
Yeah,
it's
that's
it's the
right.
whole
Yeah.
analogy, what the enemy meant for evil, right? That God, our higher power, has this ability to turn something so broken into something beautiful. And that leads me to the next point. I want to talk about this book that I'm super excited about. My wife, I want to say it was about 3 or 4 years ago. My wife's an avid reader. She loves novels. And she said, I just got my hands on this book called Acre of Fools. You got to read this when you get a chance. Such an impactful story, such a powerful story, so beautifully written. And I said, tell me the basis. Give me the background story on this thing. And so I want to hear your version of this because I believe that this book became kind of therapy for you in a lot of regards, right? But would you dive into that a little bit? First off, how you kind of got into writing, and then really why Acre of Fools is so special to you, and how it kind of pertains to your personal story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've written a few books, and most of those books come from just journal entries. I'm an introvert off the charts. Like, if there's an 11 and a 10 out of 10, I'm
Wow.
beyond.
You
So I
can't tell
process
that.
everything. Well, business has caused me to have to mask that attribute, but I process things internally.
Yeah.
So when things are happening, I'm in my head constantly. But when you have 1,000 thoughts in your head, I don't think you know really either what those thoughts are or what to do with those thoughts. And so one of the things that I would do is I would just journal, so I could start to articulate the thoughts and know how to begin to act on them. And that led to my first book, which was kind of a how-to book for other families going through illness of a child. But then it started to roll into faith-based nonfiction, and that's where most of my books are. But this one book, and the story is a little dark, so it actually has a dark origin.
Mm.
At the worst of the addiction, my daughter had a number of dealers who, in my opinion, were taking advantage of her, trafficking her, and things were really bad and really dark. And every time we would get her into care, every time we would demonstrate love and she would start to reconnect with the family, these guys would come in and suck her right back into that life. They'd pick her up from rehabs and take her out of, the last chance to keep her alive. And I came to really, really resent what they were doing. And they were also very threatening to the family, coming into the house, taking things, threatening us if we didn't pay up.
Wow.
And so, yeah, it was. it was
And
dark. It was bad.
were
It was
they
criminal.
acting like they were holding your daughter hostage or something like that, or was it a team effort basically?
Yeah, I wouldn't say they were holding her hostage, but they were certainly keeping her there. They were doing that figuratively, if not literally. But she would get into debt from all the drugs, and they would try to collect in a lot of different ways, including getting her to do things that she's not very proud of today. Yeah, so it was pretty dark. And here I am, a dad. I'm supposed to protect my daughters.
Hmm.
But I'm a man of faith. And so what does that look like? How do you protect against evil without becoming evil yourself?
Mm,
And unfortunately, I went in the wrong direction. I became just as bad as they were, and started getting into martial arts. I was never a weapons guy, but I now have many, many weapons in the house.
man.
And I learned to fight, and I wanted them to know, one, that her father was involved, because so many of these women don't have involved fathers, and
Sure.
two, I wanted them to know I was not only willing to fight, but I was capable of fighting. So,
You're my hero,
so
brother.
I got, thank you. I got just aggressive enough with them so that they knew that, I was not scared by their threats,
Yeah.
and that I was going to be involved, and I was going to do whatever it took to save my daughter, even if that meant my life came to an end, again, either literally or figuratively. And so I would sit up at night. I'm an insomniac. I don't sleep anyway, but when all this was going on, I mean, I had even more reason not to sleep. And I would plot my revenge. I would literally plot how I was going to take them out
Man.
without causing more damage to my family. And I mean, you think about it, you're laying in bed for 8 hours. If all you're doing is thinking about this, there were a lot of different things I thought up in terms of what I was going to do. And so I finally started writing this down just to get it out of my head, not to actually plan to implement it, just to get it out of my head, because I became
Mm,
obsessed with this. I mean,
wow.
downright obsessed. And all those journal entries ultimately became the book. And what I ultimately did was, and I wrote it when my daughter was still very much addicted, and this was all still very much a problem for our family.
Yeah.
But I began to write the story that had an ending that I could at least make sense out of, because none of this makes sense.
Yeah.
When you're in chaos, there's no order to it, there's no controlling it, there's no sense. And so by writing this book, I could create a narrative that at least gave purpose to it. And it ultimately became the guideline for how we got out of it in the end. So
Mm.
this
I mean,
book, very different from
it's
my
Liam
others.
Neeson. It's Taken, brother. It's that's where my
That's
mind
right.
goes. And first off, I mean, I think every man would want to be as brave and as courageous as you are in that moment, right? And there's no doubt. I'm sure your wife was worried about you. I'm sure there were conversations going on in the background, like this guy's went off the ledge here, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
but the sleepless nights, right? The hiding guns, the never thinking that your house was, I mean, when you don't have security and safety, right? When you're in that vulnerable space that anybody could break in, God knows what's going to happen next. That'll make a man crazy, right? I mean, just
yes,
point
that's right.
blank. So tell me about this. Obviously, it's a fictional book, but tell me about the basis of the novel. Like, what's the parameters around this? And we're going to go there because I'm super excited that we're going to get to announce on this podcast that I am lucky enough to be one of the producers creating this mini series with our other producing partner, Chris Grant, and my dear friend and producing partner, Mark Tillman. You're an executive producer on this project, and we've got high hopes for this mini series in pre-production right now, but going to be coming out next year. I think it's a multi-series concept, right? I think it could morph into new storylines but build the parameter around this. I mean, basically in this novel, this is kind of the fictional character that you saw yourself becoming, right? To protect your
Yes, that's
daughter.
right.
All right. So
That's
let's,
right.
you gotta hit that. Talk to about that for a second. That's exciting.
First of all, I am so excited to have you involved. I've been excited about Mark and Chris because they're awesome, and also Sharon Paul. But to have you join, I'm just so thrilled about that. So thank you for
Thank you.
investing in it, and
Absolutely.
being an enthusiastic partner along the way.
Well,
I'm
I
thrilled
believe in it a
about
lot.
that.
I
Yeah.
believe in it a lot. So this
Well,
character, um, this is you basically, right? And this is a journal
That's right.
entry concept that you're creating these storylines of how you would, sacrifice your life, how you would protect your daughter, basically plotting on how you would kind of take these guys out one by one, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So the way I describe the book is a third of it is exactly true. A third of it is mostly true. Like maybe I took two or three events and I made it into one event. And then one third is completely made up. But entire part that's made up, I had thought about doing in my head. So
Mm.
there's everything in that book has some element of reality. I had plotted to do all of these things that you see in the book, but the story is kind of the slow descent, certainly of the daughter character in there who slowly descends into drug addiction, but also the slow descent of my character, kind of from totally faithful, totally nonviolent to totally non-faithful and violent. And ultimately, this father goes out and fakes his own death so he can go take revenge on all these dealers that have been taking advantage of his daughter.
Mm.
And not only that, but then what are the consequences to my wife character in the story and the older daughter character in the story? Because when you make a decision like that, you're not only changing your own life, you're changing the life of everyone else that is part of the family. So it's the story really of all four of us and how we all descend and just have this massive arc, from simple family doing simple things to complex, twisted, dark kind of environment. Yeah.
Man. Well, I would say it's appropriately dark, right? I mean, it's just
Yeah.
it's just the right amount of dark. And I tell you, when I read the book, I couldn't put it down. And again, beautifully written, but just the storyline, I think every man, kind of goes into that character, right? As I'm reading this, I'm thinking about what I would do in those situations, and it's just it's incredible. And I think that, again, it's like it became somewhat therapeutic for you, right? To
Yes.
get this out, to put it out there of what it could be, how this could turn around. What part of the book, and by the way, if you're listening to this, you got to go get this book, guys. Anchor Fools. This is on Amazon, on all the major book platforms. But what is the one piece of the book that you really would like someone to take away? What is that piece?
Yeah. So I think it's how do you get through the messy middle? I mean, that is
Mm,
kind of the theme of your podcast is
that's right.
how do you go through real life when things and you're put in the crucible? How do you act in those moments? And then how do you recover from those moments as well? So all of us make bad decisions along the way.
Yeah.
But how bad do they get? And then how do you turn that around and how do you recover? How do you reclaim a life that's been lost?
Yeah.
And how do you resurrect it, really? Of course, you only resurrect it through Christ. But I think a life can be resurrected because he is the resurrection. So that means it's happening all the time.
Hmm.
And how do you get yourself out of that and ultimately become kind of a loving, compassionate person again when you've gone as dark as you've gone? And
Wow.
so, how do you survive it and how do you resurrect from it? I think are the two main themes there.
Unbelievable. Scott, was there a moment through this process to where you had to forgive yourself?
Yeah, I don't know that I've done that yet, to be
Wow.
honest.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm still kind of processing all of that because I didn't act the way I think I should have acted. I mean, I did what was necessary, and so I have some solace in that. And I think my daughter is alive today in part because of some of that.
Mm.
Um, but I'm still in the process of turning all of that over and allowing that weight to come off. Yeah.
Man, well, a lot of people say shame on you. I like to use the tagline, shame off you, brother. Shame
Oh,
off
thank
you.
you.
I
I'll,
mean, man,
I'll take it.
listen, I don't know how you balance it all. I don't understand it. I mean, even as an outside, I'd like to consider myself a fairly strong leader, and a great support to my family. But everything that you wrote in that book, everything that you've shared about First off, thank you for your transparency and your vulnerability because again, I don't think as men we're talking enough about the messy middle, right?
Yes.
And I think you said it perfectly when you said that, here you're putting on a CEO hat to go out into the business world, and yet you've got, drug dealers breaking into your house, right? You've
Yeah,
got,
that's right.
moments where your daughter's coming in, of highly addicted, needing money, trying to take money from you, uh, you know, not really going to bed at night, right? Just with all the fear and the anxiety and the worry of going on. That's building this imagination character in your mind of, Liam Neeson and Taken trying to protect your daughter. And yet nobody in your workspace probably even knows this is going on, you know?
Yeah, no.
And we as men, we don't talk enough about this, and again, like you said, the podcast interrupt, it's a play on that word interrupt, right? The moments that happen in our life that bring us to this place of awakening, bring us to this place of surrender. And at the end of the day, we're all trying to become the highest possible, the highest versions of ourselves, right? And I can see that in you. I can see it in your eyes. I can read it in your story. And so listen, with every bad thing that happens, right, there's a comeback story. And I think that's another
Yes.
thing that we have to share a little bit, right? It's that you can't just stop with the messy middle, right? There are men out there right now, there are women out there that are so depressed, they're so bankrupt emotionally, mentally, and physically because of what they're going through. But I'm a true believer that if you don't give up, right, that there can be positive outcome on the other side of this. So let's talk about the positive, right? Your daughter
Yes.
now,
Uh-huh.
she's no longer battling addiction. Tell me about that story, man.
No, well, and it'd take too long to unpack, but just we reconnected in a very miraculous way. And she is sober today now for 5 years,
Mm,
married to a very good man from a very good family. She lives in a home 10 minutes from us. So I would go months, like 8, 9, 10 months at a time, not knowing if she was alive or dead, not knowing where she lived, who she was with. And now I literally call, text, or see her almost every day. And it is just miraculous. You talk about resurrection. Our family that had been completely fractured, my two girls didn't speak to each other for 10 years, are now rebuilding that relationship.
mm,
And I constantly, I'm looking at my family and just seeing resurrected life. And God has rebuilt us, after allowing us at least to kind of go through that and going through the fire. And I'm just so grateful. But she's doing well. She still has some health issues that have followed her throughout her all her illnesses,
mhm.
and some of what she created throughout her addiction. But if you saw her, you would have absolutely no idea. I mean, none of what she'd been through. And
Man.
oh my gosh, I'm just feeling gratitude just as I even say that. Just how lucky we are, and to see both my daughters thriving despite what all of us went through as a family, to see my
Mm.
marriage and my wife thriving despite all that we've been through. It's just miraculous. I mean, there's just no other word for it. Yeah,
Such a beautiful story, man. What a story. What a
yeah,
beautiful story of redemption. And
yes.
it inspires me big time, man.
Oh,
I mean,
thank
I'm
you.
just like you. All I can just feel is that gratitude,
Yeah,
coming through
that's
the
right.
screen right now. And I've got goosebumps even saying that. It's just like I feel that rebound that you've had for your family, and I couldn't be more thankful. And so listen, addiction is a big thing for you, right? I mean, you can't go
Yep.
through something like this without feeling the pain and the struggles of other families that have dealt with this. And I'm just curious. I know you've really come up with two really fantastic organizations, foundations, Awareness of God, and River Soul, the River Soul project that we're attaching personally to the Acre of Fools
Yes.
project
Yep.
as a nonprofit that's going to come alongside of that model. But can you talk about those two organizations and kind of what your role is and what the overall vision and goal is for those?
Yeah, I'll take a step back to get there. I originally wrote An Acre of Fools 15 years ago, but I wrote it under a pseudonym because my daughter was still heavily addicted.
Mhm.
My wife in particular didn't want that story told. And so it kind of just got out there a little bit. The beauty of it now is my daughter very much wants her story to be told, and my
Mm,
entire family has lined up behind to say, we need to help other people who are going through
mm,
this. And so the entire family now is ready to go out and take what the enemy meant for good, for harm, to turn it to good. And so there are two things that I'm doing now that I've retired from the business world. The first is I do quite a bit of speaking
Hmm.
to let people see the work of God while they're in the midst, while they're in the messy middle.
It's great.
So I travel literally all over the world to speak to that, and that's what the awareness of God piece is. Just be aware, even when you're in the midst of incredible difficulty, pain, the world is bombarding you. Just see the presence of God, and if you can see it, you're going to have a different response to what the world is presenting to you. The second piece is the River Soul movement, and this is specifically a ministry aimed at helping support families of addicted loved ones. And that would not just be like us, parents with an addicted child, but children with addicted parents, like my grandson has,
Mm.
um, addicted siblings, addicted grandchildren. And so we're trying to support the family. When my wife and I first entered this space, we knew absolutely nothing about addiction,
Mm.
nothing. And there were some resources at the time. Again, this was started 20 years ago, but very few resources. So even the resources that were there, because we weren't aware of them, we couldn't take advantage of them. And so what we want to do is to be a bridge to help families who are dealing with this to come in and, number one, have a sense of community,
Hmm.
let them see that there are other people dealing with the same thing, and then tie them into what are now some wonderful resources to support not only the addicted loved one, but also the
Hmm.
family. And so we've created the River Soul movement. Some incredible people have come in and lined up behind this. And so we're so grateful for that. And we've put out some vision casting right now. This is not completely ready to go. We just want to have it ready when the series launches.
Yeah.
But if people wanted to access that, they could go to riversoul.org, O-R-G, and soul is S-O-U-L. They could also text the words River Soul to
Good.
53123, and they can see the technology we're going to use to deliver content. But again, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Mm.
We are lining up partners who are all ready to come in when the time is right. These are medical professionals. These are former addicts themselves. These are
Mm.
interventionists. These are people who have rehabs that are dependable, because there's so much that's not dependable in this
Sure.
space. So we want to link them to resources that are credible,
Mm.
so that they can get help, but also just be refreshed in their soul as they're going through this, because it's soul crushing,
That's right.
and we want to raise their spirits.
This is so needed, so needed. And it really goes back to that thing that community is what you said, right? People need to know
Yes,
in the world, no matter what you're going through, that you're not alone, right?
right.
And I've
That's right.
seen so many different organizations or ministries or other foundations that have really focused on the addict, but very few that really focus to support the family of the addict.
That's right.
And so, I've been able to watch your clips and your videos on that and what you're building out, and it's first class. And you're a world class leader, man. I know our time is coming to an end, and I'm going to have this all in all the share notes of how to connect with you further and deeper, and where you're going to be speaking. And again, guys, if you haven't had a chance, you got to get Acre Full. It's absolutely powerful, and I'm beyond humbled, excited to be a part of that project. Mark and I did the Hershey movie together that's coming out next year.
Yes.
So this is going to be a really strong project that's going to follow up, and it's just right up our alley, man. So thank you for sharing that gift with us. Thank you for sharing the messy middle, man. Thank you for just being
No.
raw in the middle of all this with us, because there's no doubt that I'm inspired to hear this, and it gives me a new level of encouragement and kind of focus, even for my own life. And I know I won't be the only person that thinks that. There are going to be listeners that get touched by this big time. So if you are struggling with any level of addiction, or you're the parent or the family member of an addict, please follow Scott and the River of Soul movement. It's just such a powerful organization and ministry that can really bring you the right resources that you need. So, brother, thank you for joining the Intro podcast, man. This is exactly what I was hoping it would be, and really even more. So, God bless you, brother. Wish you nothing but the best, and we'll see you soon. Okay?
Exciting times ahead.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me on.
absolutely,
Yeah.
Scott. All right, brother. Take care, man.
All right.
Thank you for spending time with me today. Remember, it's not about pretending the story is finished. It's about having the courage to keep writing it, even in the middle. If this podcast has encouraged you or inspired you in any ways, please follow us at enterupwithwill.com and across all social media platforms. And please like, subscribe, and share for more. Until next time, keep showing up, keep rising, and keep choosing to enter up.